Welcome to the Studio Chat podcast. My name is Barbara Thompson. Each week, I'll be bringing you a self-care expert or a message to help you to discover how to live your best life and understand your mind-body connection. This month, I'm going to be dedicating each and every episode to my beautiful dog, Maisie, who passed away a month ago. She was my self-care ambassador for my business, but also on every single podcast for the last 52 episodes. She has been right by my side for each and every episode I've recorded and with all of my guests. And one thing I've learned about love and unconditional love is something that Maisie showed me. She showed up every day for me. It didn't matter what I was doing, how I looked, how I felt. That beautiful dog was just my best mate, and she was always there. And it has led me in these last 4 weeks to a journey of healing, discovering more about myself, learning how to process my feelings through grief, but also just learn more about myself. And this dedication is for you, Maisie, and this month, every episode is about healing, and about spirituality, and about anything that I think that my girl would like you to hear. So, sending big love to my Maisie. I miss you a lot, and these episodes are just for you. In this episode of the Studio Chat podcast, I chat with Georgie Collinson, an anxiety mindset coach, hypnotherapist, and degree qualified nutritionist and naturopath. As a recovering perfectionist and proud high achiever, Georgie was once the prime example of someone with high functioning anxiety. Searching for answers, she discovered a lasting breakthrough for herself and her clients. And that is one of a holistic mind-body approach that considers anxiety and stress arising from your thoughts, food, gut health, hormones, and lifestyle. You know that my podcast and what I do is all about the mind-body connection and connecting the holistic side of all these different parts of our life to, making them our own and making them what feels right for us in this moment of time in our lives. Georgie has developed her anxiety reset method and her successful online anxiety reset program. And she's known, as you'll notice in our chat today, she's known for her vulnerable, honest, and down-to-earth way of speaking about mental health. She hosts the Anxiety Reset podcast and has appeared on live national TV, guest blogs, and in numerous podcast interviews. Originally from Melbourne, she's based on the Victoria's Mornington Peninsula and coaches clients from across the world. The chat that we have today, all about anxiety, is one that if you've ever experienced it in your life or you know someone that does, it can be really crippling. But Georgie specializes in high functioning anxiety, and one that, some people may not even see it as anxiety, and you may just be a perfectionist and have these thoughts in your head and you're just trying to live a life for other people, not for yourself. This episode could be for you as well. It's a really beautiful chat I had with Georgie today. I really enjoyed learning about the anxiety reset method. I have bought her book as well, so I will put a link in the show notes if you listen to the podcast and really like the way Georgie describes things. I also talk about it in the podcast a little bit, that the way that she writes the book is it's a real easy read and it's interesting, and I think you'll really enjoy it. So join me as I chat today to Georgie Collinson all about anxiety. Hi guys, welcome back to the Studio Chat podcast. Today I have Georgie with me. I looked her up after seeing her book that she's recently launched called The Anxiety Reset Method. And lately I've had a lot of women come into my counseling practice that are experiencing crippling anxiety. And I didn't even know high functioning anxiety was a thing. And I discovered your book, Georgie, and I discovered your page, and I reached out to you and was like, I have to have you on here. So thank you so much for accepting my invitation.
Oh, Barbara, it's a pleasure to be here.
It's so right. So let's get into it. So can you share with my listeners a little bit? I know this everyone does this, but just a little bit about you, where you're from, and what you do.
Yeah, of course. So I am an anxiety expert. That's the quickest way to just say what I do, because I have a whole lot of different titles. I'm an anxiety mindset coach. I'm a naturopath, a nutritionist, and a clinical hypnotherapist. And all of those things often need some like explaining for people. You know, naturopathy is all about seeing the body from a holistic perspective. We include herbal medicine and nutrition, and we also typically link a lot of things back to our gut health. So very much exploring anxiety and the way that we feel through the lens of our physical body is one of the big places of exploration for me, and an area that I feel is just so neglected and yet so powerful and so important. But then we can't ignore what's happened in our past, the experiences that have shaped us, the beliefs that we've created about ourselves and about life based on things that happened, and usually things that happen when we were very small, when we don't have the perspective on life. We can't see ourselves clearly to argue around some of those meanings and stories we've made from what's happened to us. So we automatically just make it mean it's my fault. There's something wrong with me. I'm not good enough. I need to change. I'm the problem. And so with hypnotherapy, we get to go back to a lot of those stories that really do underpin anxiety, particularly the high functioning anxiety too, but all anxiety. And we get to unravel those stories, retell them in a whole new way, and program in new beliefs that help us really move forward from these really, sometimes really big things that have happened, sometimes little tiny things that we've been used to just saying, oh, it's not a big deal. Oh, yeah, like, you know, someone used to always comment on my body and how I looked growing up, but it wasn't a big deal. Like other people have had bigger things happen. Well, it's a big deal to you, and it made you feel hyper conscious of how you look. And that is a trauma. So this is all relevant, and everything is kind of welcome to be explored. If you're experiencing anxiety, no doubt some of these experiences have happened. So that's kind of a little insight into my work and, you know, the approach that I take with anxiety. But the reason I focus on high functioning anxiety, Barbara, is because that was really my experience. You know, I was never on that level of, let's say, like agoraphobia, which is where you can't leave the house, where you're not really, you know, able to keep functioning in life. Like that's a different degree. And, you know, anxiety is on that spectrum for people. There's also panic disorder, where you're literally having panic attacks, possibly once a week, possibly once a day, sometimes multiple times per day. So that was not my experience. My experience was really about, like, in high school, I was the high achiever. I knew how to play the role. I knew how to be perfect. I knew, well, I certainly tried. And I succeeded a lot of the time and got validation back for that, which only perpetuated the cycle of, okay, I need to maintain it and I need to keep being perfect. I need to keep getting really good results. I need to keep having wonderful friendships and being invited to all the parties and having attention from boys. And that's where it began. But it wasn't seen as a problem for me at that point, because it was like, well, I'm ticking society's boxes. Yay for me. It was only in those moments where, I mean, I would have moments where I didn't feel so good about myself. But when I was 19, my parents divorced, and it was quite a shocking experience for me in my life, because I hadn't had a major groundbreaking, shaking moment that sort of ripped the seams of my reality in the same way. I found out that my dad had been having an affair, and he actually left my mum for a woman much, much younger, which was just heartbreaking. And I suddenly had to come to terms with my dad being a different person to who I had believed him to be. And when we have these experiences, it is literally, some people call them like an awakening. Honestly, I've been awakening from that for the last decade. Honestly, there are still realizations that come to me, even in recent times, about dynamics in my family and things that I couldn't see, that are all, like, each time it's like having the wool pulled from over your eyes. And each time you become more empowered and you learn more about yourself. But at the time, that was what happened. And it honestly sent me into a spin of anxiety. It was waking up every day, wondering like everything's gone wrong, that this is not how it's meant to be, and really telling that story. And it just made me feel so uncomfortable with my life. So I set on, how can I control it all? And that really came from more perfectionism.
Yes.
So if I control my diet and I eat the perfect diet, then I will have the perfect body and then I'll feel better. And I had, wellness influencers at the time were running around in bikinis with like photos of acai bowls. That still exists, but I feel like it's a lot, it's not as intense these days. This was like 2010 to like 2015 times. It was quite a different level of like, oh yeah, I have this body because I eat acai every day. And that's all, it's like not looking at genetics. Like we've got a lot more, I would say, with the body positive movement, a lot more rounded perspectives on all of that and what it takes to have a body like that. But anyway, I thought if I just eat the perfect diet, I will have the perfect body, and then life will fall into place for me, because then I'll be loved, I'll be accepted, I'll have a, great partner who won't leave me, blah, blah, blah. And guess what? That made me more anxious. It did lead me to study nutrition and naturopathy, which is kind of a good thing, but that's the honest truth of the beginning of that journey for me. So it's like we can try to make these positive changes, but often they're fueled from more fear, and that just spins us more into anxiety. So we have to eventually start to make choices from a loving place. And eventually I figured out this all-rounded approach for working with anxiety that incorporates the food we eat, our hormones, our nutrition, our gut health, our sleep, our exercise, our relationships with people, our connection with nature, and very much so the thoughts, the awareness of our thoughts and the story that we tell about ourselves. And that is the anxiety reset method. That is the 12-step process, 12-week process you go through in the book. And that brings us to now.
Yeah. Whereabouts are you based?
I am based in, well, that's a good question. I am kind of a digital nomad these days, which means I sort of roam around the world, but I have mostly been based on the Mornington Peninsula in Australia and Victoria, but I've spent huge chunks of time in Bali, in Portugal, going back to Portugal soon, which is really exciting. Going to go to Egypt from there, just running my life, working with clients from there, living the dreams beyond the limits of what my anxious mind once told me was possible for my life.
Yeah, living your purpose by the sound of it. It's really, thank you for sharing that too, because as soon as I saw you, I was like, you're very vulnerable. You're very, very similar to me. And to be honest, didn't realize how similar you were. I have read the beginning part of your book. Our journey, I hate that word, but it is what it is. Very similar to me. My parents separated when I was 20. And my dad went for a younger woman. It was a very shock. It was my dad changed from that moment, and I was daddy's little girl. It shaped me, and it like ripped me to my core, like you said. And I was never an anxious person or anything, but what it made me do is focus on my body and hitting the gym, and it took me for a really long time to get that perfect body. And 7 years ago I competed in bodybuilding, and my listeners know about that journey for me, and I did it all. And looking at the photos, absolutely had the whatever you want. For me, it was a vision that I had for a long time. I want the perfect body, but it still didn't fix me. I was unhealthy. It was very external for me. It was very control, external validation. My health didn't come into it. My values, what's values? What's belief? What's mindset? What's gut health? Like, I just was a Trojan. I just pushed on through to get what I wanted to get.
Yeah.
Again, high functioning in that way can keep going. And in our society these days of this, I guess, culture of, hustling and no sleep and wearing it with a badge of honor. And, why I've got you on here to have a chat is anxiety is one of these words, and ADHD starting to become part of it too. Stress was it before COVID. It's a key word that sits in the media and that sits in everyone's world for 18 to 24 months, and it moves on to the next word. And at the moment, anxiety is one of those words that just keeps coming up and coming up. And I just think, great, for the awareness, but it's also pretty shit, because I think if anyone's listening to this, if you have experienced anxiety at any level, it is crippling. It is horrible. A lot of people still don't talk about it, but it shows up so differently for everyone, and it can change over your life. So some people may think of it just as a racing heart, not being able to breathe, panic attacks, sweaty palms. And in my practice, I hear so many women define themselves of, I'm just trying to think of the words that they use. Yeah, it's almost like, hi, I'm going to use myself as an example. Hi, I'm Barbara and I've got anxiety. And they use it as a tool to define who they are. But also I see it that it really defines them so much that it holds them back from living their life. And especially women, because we have to wear all these different hats. And in today's world, we don't have many role models that are working full-time mums. We can have it all, yes, but there's all these other factors that are playing into these women's lives. We're not biologically designed to live the life we live now. We are born to gather food, nurture our children, nurture the community, and tell stories and sleep, and that's pretty much it, right? And now you look at our worlds of how we function today, it's completely different to what our brain and our body has been designed to do.
Yeah. 100%. And what's interesting too, especially for anyone listening who can relate to Barbara and I, our experience with the father situation and that severing of that complete mind-blowing revelation of that relationship not being what you thought it was, is that we are then driven to live our lives based on principles unconsciously. We're not doing it deliberately, to gain that attention, approval, love, respect, admiration from that parent. And so a lot of people will experience this from a mother as figure as well. Sometimes it's both. It depends, honestly, on your situation, but most of us are trying to seek the approval of a parent, and it's almost always the parent whose love we weren't always as sure about. And that then leads us further away from living authentically, just like you were saying, living with the rhythms of nature, being in touch with our hearts. And anxiety pushes us more in that zone. So really mastering your anxious mind is a process of becoming more and more conscious of these ways that you have kind of contorted your life into a version that's going to make someone else happy. And if you think you're not doing that, that is a sign that maybe there's something to look at, because we are all unconsciously doing it on some level unless we've done that work. It's just part of psychology. It's part of how we grow up and how we develop as human beings in a society. We are so driven to belong that it is just insidious, this drive, this urge to seek approval. Yeah. And so the more we can have awareness of that, see it for what it is, and then make a choice.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I don't want to work this office corporate job. I want to work for me. Or actually, I don't know if I do want to have children. I was just always told that that's what I should do. And, give me grandchildren, all these things that we don't question, we can question and decide for ourselves consciously as the adults we are what we want for our lives. And that will quell anxiety down, because anxiety is like this little beautiful alarm system that goes off when we are not living our lives authentically to ourselves. It's like we're driving on the highway of our lives. We go off to the side and we hear that bumpy sound of the side of the road that kind of goes, that's anxiety. And it's your friend, and it's guiding you back to a more whole, more fulfilled, authentic version of you. And it is so worth that journey to listen to it.
It sure is, because a lot of people that have experienced anxiety it's in human nature, but will go against it, so block it, or do anything they can just to not hear it, because doing the work, and I know in your book, I've bought your book and read the first part of it, and guys, it's definitely something, I bought the ebook, but if you know anyone that suffers from anxiety or has any form of anxiety, or you yourself, highly, highly recommend. So after this podcast, I want you to download it or go buy it, because it's written as if I'm talking to you now. Like, I can really, after meeting you, obviously face to face, I can hear your voice throughout the whole book, and it's a really easy read because it just feels like you're talking to one of your girlfriends who's sharing their experience of and it's so beautifully written and easy to read that it's not, some people are like, oh, reading a book about anxiety will give me anxiety, and there's a fear of, no one's done any therapy or no one's done any of this, you hear people talk about, I meditate, I journal, I do this inner work. And I know people that haven't done that before really go, oh, for God's sake, it sounds horrific. But if it's coming from a good place, because some of that may not work for you. And the beauty about what you do is it's, again, your bio-individuality. It's what you need at that time, but looking at the holistic approach, which I don't think many people are still to this day aware of. It's not just one or two things.
Yeah.
It's a variety of things, but also it's a reason why it's called doing the work. There's a reason why when people feel anxiety, one of the things, and I'd be interested to see what, if you come across this as well, any of my clients who experience anxiety, it always comes from a place of control, because as human beings, I talk about it, I feel like I'm on repeat because I talk about it so much, but we talk about how we're made onto this earth with our brain and our body. We don't like uncertainty because back in the day, our brain recognizes that if we don't have certainty, we're going to get killed. That's kind of like, that's how we live. So once people have the awareness that this is hardwired into us, we're hardwired negative. We're hardwired to not feel good enough. We're hardwired because it's to keep us in the tribe and to keep us safe. And that was a real light bulb moment when I found out all this stuff. I was like, I'm 42 now, but when I think it was about 35 when I discovered all of this, and I felt really ripped off. I was like, are you kidding me? Really? How come we're not taught this at school? How come I don't know about this before, that we're hardwired negative? And I thought it was just a Barbara thing. I thought it was just because I'm a high achiever and I can have so much on my plate and I can work really hard and I'm a Trojan horse. Everyone's like, oh, you're so strong in many aspects. Yeah. But also under the covers or under that, no one sees what really is going on. And it's just that constant push. But having the conversation of anyone listening to this, all of us want certainty, but guess what? We can't have it. And I think once you realize that that's the human condition, and that's where sometimes anxiety can come from, is we want to be able to control the outcome. We want to know what's going to happen all the time. And yeah, life isn't like that. So is that kind of what you see often too with your clients?
100%. And, I don't explicitly say it this way in the book. I say that we live in an anxiogenic environment, meaning that there are triggers for anxiety all around us. But we do also live in an environment that is set up, a society set up to invalidate our experience. And what I mean by that is this culture of put on a happy face, come on, be happy, have a positive mindset, have a positive outlook, don't be sad. It's not appropriate to show your emotions, especially in the public eye, right? And so this often ends up in our households as well. Oh, I don't want my kids to see me upset. So parents start to hide their emotional expression from their children. The children learn it's not okay to have my feelings. And we all learn these feelings that I have inside myself are not okay. I've got to hide them. I've got to get rid of them as quickly as possible. I've got to keep them down. Oh my gosh, if I cry, I've got to stop crying. If I can't stop crying, I've got to hide that from people. And look at me, I'm too sensitive. You're not too sensitive. You're not weak. You are not too negative. You have emotions, and we all have them. And everything in society is telling us don't have them, basically.
So like a weakness.
Yes, 100%. So we have to start claiming back that power, because look what happens to us. We start telling a story. There's something wrong with me. I'm the sensitive one. I'm the weak one. I'm the anxious one. Instead of just looking at the fact that we've got emotions that are there for a reason. They help us to deal with life. Life's quite challenging. Life comes with its really hard, difficult moments. And our instinct to cry and feel sad and have a big wail about that, have a big tantrum about life, is innate within us to help our nervous system cope and reset. That's how we release stress. Cortisol, we cry out through our tears. That's our stress hormone. We're releasing it through tears. So when we repress all of that, we're going to experience more anxiety, and the cycle perpetuates where we end up going, oh, there's something wrong with me. Oh my gosh, I've got all these emotions to feel. I don't want to feel them. Now I'm feeling anxious. There's something wrong with me. And on we go until we eventually look it in the eye and go, actually, I'm allowed to have these feelings. We start validating our own experience. Maybe you've got some supportive relationships in your life. Maybe it's a therapist, a counselor, a coach, someone who can validate some of your experiences for you to help guide you into that state and seeing it that way. And you eventually learn that it's okay to have emotions. And we can say this, but it's a totally different thing to practice it and experience it. And it is lifelong. I have moments still where I'm like, I don't want to feel the feeling. If there's another feeling here. I know this stuff so well, but I catch it. Eventually I'll catch it and I'll go, oh my God, look at me. I'm shaming a feeling again. And then it's like, well, how do we need to release this? Do I need to scream into a pillow? Do I need to just have a good cry? Do I need to just sit with myself and say, you're doing really well, dealing with some really hard stuff?
That's a really nice one. You actually put your hand on your heart when you said that too. I felt that. That's beautiful, Georgie. It's a practice.
Yeah.
And that's what I really would love people to hear, that life is hard. We go through good times and bad times, light and darkness. But I would love people to know that with this work, it gets easier. There's enjoyment in the hard stuff. And for me, sharing my experience, I didn't really know what anxiety was, had never experienced it. But looking back, yes, I was very high functioning and I had those thoughts and stuff. But for me, anxiety, when I saw my girlfriends in their 30s and stuff, when they became mums and all that kind of stuff, I could see it in them, and they'd say, I've got anxiety. And it was very to do with the breath and to do with the sensations in their body and their blurred vision, or their, not being able to eat, or their sweaty palms. It was very physical. And we would talk about that as friends. But now I'm on the other side of, I've experienced a bit of anxiety myself, and it felt like that for me. Once the crack was in the vase, it was always there. Before, I hadn't allowed myself to feel it, probably. I think that's where it came from. But I've really felt, once I had that first experience of where I couldn't breathe and I was like, what is this? Oh, and I remember going, oh, this is anxiety. Oh, right. Now I'm part of the club. Like, I get it now. And it felt like that moment when that little crack, when I let that in, it's always been there, but now it's such a beautiful thing, because it's almost like my little intuition buddy. And when I get those feelings, because I was someone that would never cry in our family, there's no love, there was no feelings. Crying was weakness. And when I started to go to an anxiety group, oh my God, 6-7 years ago, someone I knew said, you need to come along to this. It was probably about 10 or 12 women who I'm new to this area. I didn't know anyone. And then someone said, they knew I had anxiety, and they said, why don't you come down to like a support group? And I was like, what? What shame. I'm not going. How embarrassing. I don't want people to know I've got anxiety. I want to sit with strangers and talk about my feelings. This was before I was a counselor or anything. I thought, you know what, bugger it, I'll go. And I went, and it was just one of the most awesome things I've ever done. But in that moment, I learned that the facilitator pulled me up on it, and I thank her to this day. As women started to cry, do you know what I would do? Is I would see someone crying, and I think some of my listeners could resonate. As soon as they started to cry, I would look around. I'd feel uncomfortable as hell, and I'd be like, where's the tissue box? And without even me realizing, what I was doing is stifling their feelings. I would get the tissue box and give it to someone. And what happens when someone gets a tissue box? They pick up the tissue, but it stops them. Mm-hmm. So it made me so uncomfortable that my subconscious was like, holy shit. And I'm a fixer, and I'm a really deep empathetic person. So I feel a lot of stuff. But in that moment, when we all cried, but it was constant, I was like, and this facilitator could see me she let it go for a couple of weeks, and I would like look around, and she would purposely put the tissues around the room, and I'd have to get up. No one else did it. And it used to piss me off, because I just think, how rude. None of you guys care. I'm going to get the tissue box and give it to the person. It's like the little girl in me. I'm going to get the tissue box and give it to the person that's crying. And then about the third week, she said, "Can you stay behind?" And I was like, "Oh, yes, what have I done?" And she's like, "I've been watching you." And she shared this and she says, "How do you feel about crying?" And I was like, "It's horrible." And before, when I would cry, I would feel it coming up my chest. And you know how you do that horrible swallow? Like you go, "Oh my God, it's coming." It would be so strong. And I do that swallow, like block it down, block it down. And when it would come up, it would just be a roller coaster of this real hard force. And then once you let it out, it's fine. And through this group, I went through learning about not stuffing other people's feelings down because it made me feel uncomfortable, but learning to sit just when you have those thoughts or have those feelings. People talk about it as a wave. I let it flow, and it was practice. Let me tell you, I didn't nail it the first, second, third time. And even now, after just losing my beautiful dog, going through the grieving process, I was like, oh, wow, I could recognize it would come up, stop a little bit, and it would come out. And that's when you know that you've, doing the work. I will do this for the rest of my life. And I have moments where I laugh at myself because I go, "Oh, you dick, just cry." It's no, because it was, "Oh, Barbara's crying again. She's such a crybaby." That was one of my stories. No, it's just I have emotions and I was never taught how to process my emotions or feelings or thoughts. But I'm someone that sometimes I see an ad about a dog and I'm crying, I laugh and go, "What a beautiful person I am to have these feelings." And I'd love people, it's just that change of how you talk about yourself, how you see yourself. And then that flows on to people around me. So I hold space really comfortably now when people see me for some really tough stuff and they cry. And they're like, I'm so like, "Why do we apologize?" "I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry." I think a lot of people can resonate. "Oh God, I'm so sorry, I'm crying." It's like, no, it's great. Let it out. How do you feel?
Yeah. I mean, a lot of us have not been held with when we're in that emotional state in the way that we need, with presence, with understanding. Usually we've been shamed and shut down. Usually we've been told we're too sensitive, we're being dramatic, get over it, and this is very damaging. In fact, so many of us grow up really not knowing what true love is, which
Yes.
sounds so cliche, right?
Yeah.
But unconditional love means, I think one of the easiest ways to understand it is to understand the love between a mother and a baby, where that baby can scream and cry and shit itself and all the things, and it's still loved, right? Mum still loves it, mum's still singing to it. That's pretty unconditional. And we can be examples of this. We can choose today to change that cycle, give it to ourselves. So it's unconditionally loving yourself, meaning, okay, I haven't done my makeup and I've got a pimple on my face and I'm exposing an ugly feeling right now, or what we might feel is an ugly feeling. And I still love me. I'm still with me. I'm supporting you. I'm here for you. Speaking to yourself that way. And when we can do it for ourselves, we can do it for others. And that's where it's so much easier to hold that space for others. If you're uncomfortable by something someone else is doing, especially when it comes to an emotional expression, you can't sit there and let them be in their emotions. It's all about you. It's that big moment. Yeah.
And that's why I shared it, because I would never be someone that would go to a group thing. I was a very private person. No way I would ever show my feelings. But I'm a very touchy-feely, honest, vulnerable person. But it was just blocked for such a long time.
Totally. And even this idea of like being a private person, why do we become private people? Because it's not safe to share. Yeah. We haven't been around people where it's felt really safe to share what's really going on.
Yeah, very true. Yeah, that's right. And when we have shared, people have taken, that, away from us and made us feel bad about. And most of the time, people shame us about our strengths. So very tall poppy syndrome, it is around the world, but in Australia and New Zealand, very much like if someone's good or someone's doing something, without even realizing it, our mind will go, "Oh, that's not fair," or they're not really good at that. And it's just that talk. We want to bring them down because it's our own insecurities rather than going, "Wow, good on you."
Yeah.
No?
100%. Yeah. And if we're not in a healthy place to be able to hold that, it can very easily lead to agonistic, sort of antagonistic behavior, which is things like gaslighting and bullying sort of behavior, emotional abuse. You mentioned the words of the moment. Webster's Dictionary word of the year last year was gaslight.
Yeah.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
It is, for anyone listening who's not aware, gaslighting is where someone shares an emotional experience or an experience and the other person invalidates that experience, says, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. No, it didn't. No, I didn't say that. No, I didn't do that. So you've said you hurt me. Someone goes, no, I didn't hurt you. And then the next step is that they next say, it's so exhausting living with someone who is so, sensitive, or you're being so dramatic. So then it's turned onto you. And when this happens, we're going to experience some anxiety. We're going to experience some issues trusting ourselves as well. And I mean, that's just such a, like, we act like, I remember thinking that was something that happened to other families and in other people's lives, but not mine, because I had a quote unquote good family. But, these patterns are so insidious and so common through our culture of like saying, getting defensive in an argument, saying, no, that's not true. I didn't do that. Gosh, you're sensitive, getting frustrated with others. And again, it's that pattern of invalidating an emotional experience that someone's having, which I think really does underpin so much anxiety.
That's right. And even someone saying, and it always is people that you've loved or loved that will say, oh, just calm down, or if you're more chill, it'll work out. It's like, I have been gaslit. I definitely could write a book about that with my experience. And that's what I mean is it makes you feel, if you get a moment where you'll get gaslit and you're not really sure if you are, you get a moment, your intuition is always bang on, you have this feeling, but you're like, oh, must be something wrong with me. I'm crazy. I want you to stop in that moment and hear my voice and hear, no, 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 it's got nothing to do with you. It's the other person projecting their stuff onto you. It's just that you're almost a threat to them because they could never be what you are. And so what they want to do is it's either around cheating, or most of the time in my experience, it was always with partners that were doing something dodgy, business wise, financial wise, or with other women behind my back. And every time, that's why I want that gut. And that's why I love what you do, because yes, you do connect the mind. They say the gut's the second brain. And with your work, that's what you explore. And every single time, ladies, I'm sure that there's been something in your life, an experience where you're like, and it's a fleeting moment and it's very strong, but you get this like, that's not right, or he or she's doing this, and you second guess yourself. As soon as that fleeting moment comes in, you're like, oh, no, I'm being silly. And you've been right every single time. And then you have someone that you love, a parent, a family member, a partner, or someone at work that's like, oh, and they almost say it in a really condescending, laughable manner, which makes you feel like a piece of crap, because you're like, oh, gosh, it must be me. Oh, and it will be connected to your story somehow. And then you add that to your story.
Yeah. And I think it can be so subtle and insidious. I mean, there's so many versions of emotional abuse,
Yeah.
but gaslighting is one. But typically seeing the pattern that you experience with someone in your interactions, if you are repeatedly feeling worthless, feeling anxious, feeling depressed, feeling less than around somebody, it's a good indicator of what's going on. And also noticing, like, have they got the ability to really self-reflect?
Yeah.
Most of us, when we share a concern, like your behavior has upset me, most of us will kind of go, oh, have I? Like, what have we really sort of start to think, like, is this true? Have I done something? Okay, let me look back at what happened. Oh, yeah, I guess I wasn't being my best self in that moment. You know what? I was flustered. I was stressed. Gosh, I am sorry. I didn't mean to be like that. Whereas in these cycles of emotional abuse, there's no reflection. It's just, no, that didn't happen. No, you're wrong. I'm not like that. You're being too sensitive.
Yeah, very quick. And I think too, in those moments, if I was to reflect on my past and what I've been through, it was always doing things for other people, always doing things of what I think society should do, of what will make my parents proud. Or like I got married just because I thought writing was on the wall. Should never have done it. Okay. It wasn't even in a good place before we got married. But I thought, well, literally, this is what went through my mind. And I'm sure it goes through many people's minds. Well, I'll do it because we've been together for 8 years and yeah, it's what you do. It's the right thing to do. And maybe things will get better. So as soon as you catch yourself doing things for, like, yes, as human beings, we can be caring and do things for other people. I don't want people to hear that. What I want them to hear is when your life revolves around your job, how you live your life, your lifestyle around another person, just to make them happy. No, it doesn't matter about me. Like my children, it doesn't matter about me. I'm a mother. I'll put my kids first. When you lose yourself in any aspect, that's something that to come back to yourself and go, hang on. Whose life am I living? Am I living my parents' life? Am I living my boss's life? Am I living my children's life? Or am I living my life?
Exactly. And that self-sacrificing vision or ideal of the mother who sacrifices for everyone and puts herself last in every situation, that is so celebrated by patriarchal values, is exactly what I've only in recent times figured out is my internal, there's a pushback in me, there's a resistance around motherhood in myself. Like there's a part of me that's like yes to that, and a part of me that's like, oh no. And I've recently pinned it. It's like, that's what it is. It's the fact that what I've been shown as a symbol and a representation of who I would have to become to do that is put everyone else first, yourself last, and that's it for you, like end of your life and you being important. And I won't do that to myself.
Yeah.
So what I've realized is there's another way. There's a plan, there's another pathway, there's another option. And that is, again, it comes back from stepping away from the approval seeking and what, family members or people around me might say is a good mother, and deciding what I want that to be for myself one day.
So it's your plan. It's Georgie's plan.
Exactly. Like
you do it your way.
It doesn't have to look the way, good on Instagram. It doesn't have to look the way that people would want it to look. I don't need people to fawn around me saying, oh my gosh, you're so self-sacrificing. You do everything for everyone else. Yeah. Like, what is this? What is this? It's so crazy.
Yeah. You're such an amazing mum. All the mums that I see that burn themselves out, that I have a hard job just looking after myself, so I don't even know how. And people laugh. I'm like, well, it's true, because I'm working on my mind. I'm working on all this other stuff. But how burnt out people are, that they are just literally running from. Our bodies are amazing that can keep up, but they're just doing everything for everyone, and they're just this vessel, and they're empty. They have no voice. They can have no emotions. And that's just why I'm just really excited that they've got the ability now to connect with you, but also pick up your book and have a read of it. And I'd love, if I'm going to ask you a question, the question I want to ask you is, if someone's listening to this now and they've got anxiety of any form, is it something they have to be crippled with, and like, does it have to look like that for the rest of their life, or can it change?
Absolutely not. Nothing is too great to overcome. Everything we experience emotionally, internally, comes back to the words and pictures that we are forming with our mind. Our mind can be manipulated for good, not just in bad ways. Our mind can be manipulated in ways that serve us. You can literally close your eyes right now and imagine yourself, walking on a beach in a tropical location, a fresh coconut in your hands. Just imagine you don't have anything to do all day except walk along this beach, sand in between your toes, wading into the fresh crystal waters. There's a dolphin off in the distance. Like, what a beautiful scene. And all of a sudden, if you open your eyes now, you'll notice your experience is different to what it was. And that's because of you responding to an image in your mind that you just created, you actively, consciously created and chose to create. It's easier when these things are so programmed into our mind that they become our new familiar, our new reality, and we start to see our life differently. But yes, there is so much that we can shift. You might have things that stress you out in life, because that's okay. And we're going to be triggered. That's the next layer of growth. But ultimately, like this baseline of living, especially if you've got crippling like panic attacks and all this stuff, that is so treatable and so manageable.
Mm. Yeah, it's awesome. And I think it's just great because having this conversation that it's with high functioning anxiety, it's like you said, mindset, people's thoughts, beliefs, their trauma release, their gut health, their hormones, their nutrition, lifestyle, and intuition, and how we live our lives daily. That's the recipe in the big melting pot of why someone may be feeling that way. And only now the conversation is starting to come up with food. How food in the 80s and 90s is different to what it was today. It's have your loaf of bread, shut up, kids. I had bread when I was a kid. There's nothing wrong with it. 20 years ago, I would agree with that because the gluten was made differently and there wasn't so much sprayed on it. But now you look at all the kids that are coming through and all these, how they are with anxiety. And I see young girls as well with anxiety, and it's and how their mind, honestly, how their minds are developed. I have kids as young as 10, 12 that see me, and the conversations we have are on the same level as a woman of my age in my 40s. They worry about the same things. They are presenting with anxiety. They can really clearly tell me what anxiety is, probably better than what I can. They have this, it's just this generation that I'm seeing, huge worries on their shoulders. They're not being children. And the things they talk about, I'm like, I have a lesson plan. I've learned now, but I used to have a session plan for what I would think when I started to work with these young people. And that really didn't last too long. I'd meet them and straight away be like, well, I've just got to wing this because you're certainly not what I had in mind. We can't talk about little ponies, not that we were, but the conversations we have just blow my mind. And these little people, because they're little people, the parents let them grow up too quickly. They have conversations that, most males, their frontal part of their brain isn't developed till they're 25 or 27. And these little kids are exposed to so much stuff, and parents are letting them be adults. On top of that, the anxiety of school and the anxiety of Instagram and social media being perfect. And then on top of that, the food and the chemicals that are in our food, that absolutely, if a mother was giving a kid milk or bread, I'm really just making just examples here. And look, I ate it. I ate Weet-Bix in my day. I had this, sit down, eat your food, eat it all up. And those days have changed because if you just look at the breakdown of how the food's made and how it's produced and everything, and with their little bodies, it's different to when we were kids, adults were kids. And it's just changing all the time. And people having the awareness is key. Once we know this stuff, you can do your own research, be your own biggest advocate, ask people questions, send you a message, and really start doing things for yourself.
Yeah, 100%. I picked up Stolen Focus by Johann Hari the other day. I don't know if you know that book. It's amazing. Talks about why none of us can pay attention, and it really brings in a very interesting discussion around ADHD as well, and whether it is this whole, condition that we need to be necessarily treating with medication. It's an amazing, amazing discussion. So take a read if you're curious. But there was a part in it where he speaks about children several decades ago would spend hours and hours playing every day outside in the neighborhood with the other children. They would run off into, parks and, play cricket in the street and play games and be surrounded by other kids solving problems without parents around, without parental supervision. The parents were there, but not constantly hovering around. And then we have, where we're at with parenting now, where that's seen as neglectful to let your kids be out for hours and hours. But it's just such a drastic change to society and what childhood means that I wonder the effects of, children spending so much time with adults, having adult conversations in the adult home. We look at the pandemic and lockdown and what that's the effects of that. Children not associating with other children and not roaming free, not just playing, swimming in the river and building a raft and getting into trouble. I mean, I remember being a kid one time getting into like a dumpster with like rubbish in it and found like a empty can of like paint, house paint, and probably got it got it all over us and we got in trouble. But it's those experiences that you learn from, and that's where you make those mistakes and you grow and you choose, okay, I'm not going to do that next time. I got covered in paint. Like these moments of unsupervised childhood time are also so crucial for our brain development, for our behavioral development, for how powerful we see ourselves as too. It's that self-efficacy piece. Like, I'm okay. I know, like, when I need to get home, I'll find my way. All of those things. It's really interesting because, again, still there's a part of me that's like, is that neglectful?
Yeah. Because a person's going to be a person, no matter what their age. So you can teach a child their values and their beliefs and help them build their story, but then they are just their own person.
Yes.
So you've got to give them, yes, there's parenting and stuff, but you can't, as much as I think I would back in the day, and even probably now if I was to have a child, helicopter parent, wrapping them in cotton wool, 100%, because I know what's out there. But also I would, that's my thing, it's not my child's thing, and let them go out and get dirty and muddy and fall over and have a big scrape and break a bone, and because I did. And it's interesting too is when I did my nutrition studies too, is there's a certain food colorings that didn't used to be present in food but are present in food now that can really make kids hyper. So, when kids have sugar, yes, but there's it's a red food coloring or red food dye that's on the top of my head. I'd have to look at it and possibly put it in the show notes. If anyone's interested, I can send them the PDF of what I've got in my study notes. But it did say a lot of studies were done on these particular food dyes and how the food dyes react to the children's behavior. And I'm just so interested to know, I'm no doctor, I'm no whatever, but when this whole anxiety word comes up or ADHD comes up, it's so interesting that I'm curious to know if it could just and curious, like I know I've read that in your book too. I love that you always say part of this is just sitting with it, awareness, but just be curious and just sit there and just be, I wonder. And I wonder if children just being children, that's what's happening, and they're getting labelled with this ADHD thing because a kid can't sit still in class or whatever. I don't know about you, but I remember sitting on the carpet at school and there's always a couple of naughty little shits that would disrupt the class and talk back to the teacher and you'd have days where you couldn't. I know me, I've had days where I couldn't focus, but it didn't mean that when I talk a lot and I'm loud, doesn't mean I've got ADHD.
Yeah, doesn't mean we need to pathologize it. Sitting in front of a screen is the new climbing a tree. That's going to have impacts on children, and I have all compassion for why the child might have ended up with the iPad and the tired parents and this is the easiest way to just cope and all those things. But it doesn't change the need to address and look at what's going on as well. And gosh, it's such a big thing because it's definitely not so like blaming the individuals isn't necessarily the answer either. There's so many reasons why we get hooked on our screens and all of that too, that are more systemic and societal that I think require like literally a movement, like a societal change. So I'm glad we're having this chat because this is part of it.
Yeah, and I am too. And like circling back to, as we're just starting to wrap this up, is circling back to obviously being so lucky to talk to an anxiety expert. Like thank you. I'm so grateful I get to have this conversation with you. I think part of it or a lot of it stems down to the love we have for ourselves. And I never thought it was a thing. I thought it was you people would talk about it and it was a bit bullshit and you love yourself, whatever. But I actually genuinely do. And yes, I'm not perfect and I've got so much work to do, but I have that place where I can go, I've had to have my own back my whole life. I haven't had anyone to lean on. I've had no love, no support. So I've only had me, and I've got through these really tough times. I've got my own back. Oh, Barbara, I'm going to be okay. And I think that once we give ourselves permission to learn to what love yourself means to you as an individual, that anxiety will unwrap itself. And when it comes up, it won't be so, oh my God, I've got to get rid of it. Oh, hello, name it if you have to. Hello, Fred, you're back again. Laugh. It's a mechanism that's trying to help you and try and work with it. And I know this may sound foreign to anyone that's like, oh, sure, Barbara, like it's easy for you to say. But one day coming back to this podcast and listening to it, it may make sense.
Yeah, totally. And just even the inclination, one of the biggest things I love to give people is just the hope that it's possible. Because if we can get our mind onto a vision of ourselves, that is a big part of where the journey shifted for me, was seeing a vision of myself. I describe this in the book, of being that person that can calm the nervous system, being that person that can walk around grounded through the day, that feels connected to nature and earth and self, and, knows how to love herself. I am that person a lot of the time now, not every day, not every moment, but I really am. And sometimes I reflect back to when I wasn't, and I thought about this person. And so if you can right now just at least have that vision that that's possible, at least imagine what that could look like for you. There is so much evidence and research out there that shows our mindset's the blueprint, and then we create it. We're so much more likely to create it if we can see it. So start imagining what's possible there. And you'll notice, even in just imagining yourself not as the anxious person, imagining this calm, cool version of you is going to help you feel calmer right now.
Yeah, it's so possible. What would you say to yourself today, present day, to Georgie back then when you were experiencing those feelings and the heaviness of it and just the cloudiness of it? What's one thing that you would say to yourself now looking back?
It's something that there is an intuition part of me that says this to myself, even now when I'm going through something challenging. And it is, you are going to love how this journey unfolds. Like, it is the most amazing adventure, because it doesn't matter where we're at in the journey. It doesn't ever end. We never get to the happy ever after moment. So it's just this, like, these highs and these lows. And when I look back at the peaks of happiness and experience and love and all the things I've experienced since then, like, I wouldn't change it. And I know that right now, even whatever's challenging me now, I have huge, amazing peaks and wonderful experiences ahead too. I'm just going to love how the story unfolds. I always will.
See how lovely. I actually teared up. That was, as soon as you said that, it hit me somewhere, and I was like, oh God, that's resonate that on some level. I got really teary and was like, wow. And I just sat with it. See, guys, work in progress, crying on a podcast. It's okay. But that's beautiful, because how often do we hear those words? Anyone listening to this now, have they ever heard anyone say those beautiful words? No. You can guarantee it. That's the first time a lot of people have heard that.
Yeah. That's not me. That's my inner voice coming through.
Oh,
that's
yeah.
For me. That just honestly, it's just another piece of ourselves, of our consciousness we can connect to, that is such a stream of love, and you can access that too. And that's another form of self-love. And it's just one way. But gosh, this journey of life, it is unfolding in so many beautiful ways as well, at the same time as all the uncomfortable stuff. And there's always moments you're going to be so glad happened.
Yeah, and allowing discomfort to come into your life.
Yeah.
Allowing it to have these moments. And so, wow, if anyone's listening to this and they want to reach out to you and work with you or find out a bit more about you, where can they find you?
I hang out over on Instagram a lot at Georgie the Naturopath, but I also have a podcast called the Anxiety Reset Podcast. They're probably the best spots. Or go check out the book, The Anxiety Reset Method, in bookstores around Australia.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining me today and having a chat about this. At some stage, definitely would love to have you back to really talk about some nitty gritty once I get some questions and some feedback from the episode. I'd love to put the question out there of what people really would like to know about anxiety. yeah, I think that'd be really great.
Oh, thank you so much, Barbara. It's been so amazing connecting with you and having this conversation. We've gone to some really cool places with it. So thank you.
Thank you so much for listening. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and it has inspired you on your self-care journey. Please feel free to share this with a friend and subscribe over on Apple Podcast. I really love hearing your feedback. So guys, please feel free to write a review on Apple and let me know which part of this episode resonated with you the most. To fall in love with yourself is the first secret to happiness. To find out a bit more about Self-Care Studio or the Studio Chat podcast, head over to my Instagram page, self_care_studio, or on my website, selfcarebybarbarathomson.com.au. Really look forward to seeing you on the next episode. Look after you. And I'll catch you soon. Bye!